But another way to look at safety from the point of view of cycling is to compare risks and benefits. And I mentioned before that cycling is great, walking too, to get physical activity and reduce the risk of those horrible chronic diseases of our time. And what you can see here is that the benefits of cycling hugely outweigh the risk of injury. So for every one life potentially lost from an injury crash, a whole bunch of studies have been done, and they estimate sort of between 10 and 100 lives saved from reducing those chronic diseases. So it's a huge benefit to risk ratio. So what can we do to overcome people's fear of cycling because of injury risk? And that one of the things that I've studied a lot from both the point of view of where people are willing to ride and whether they're willing to ride, but also the safety, the injury risk, is route type. And it was possible when we went out and tried to study those two issues that we would find that route type made no difference to either one. But I can tell you that our research has shown that route type, route design, makes a huge difference to both those things. And we've got research about 16 different route types, but tonight I'm just going to focus on a few of them that are on busy streets, because commercial, of course, is a busy street. So I'm going to talk about busy street route types and our results for this research. So first of all, the most dangerous route type and the place where people are least willing to ride are busy city streets with no bike infrastructure and parked cars. So where cyclists need to ride between parked cars and moving cars with no space delineated for them, that's where people are least willing to ride and is also the most dangerous route type that we studied. Adding this simple little chevron, bicycle symbol with the two chevrons on top called sharrows doesn't help much. It is still one of the least safe route types and does not encourage people to ride. The next step, which many people and many cities have been thinking, hey, this is a big next step, is adding a painted bike lane. This is Burrard Street, and it's a painted bike lane, but in fact it doesn't improve things much. Between parked cars and moving cars, it still doesn't encourage most people to ride, and it is slightly safer, but not much safer. This change actually does make things safer by about 40%. It's having a bike lane, but no parked cars. So we have very few streets where we don't have car parking. And unfortunately, although it is better on the motivation to cycle, it still doesn't really encourage many people to ride. And you can kind of see an example here of why. There you can see this car just a little bit further ahead on the bike lane stopped or parked there, and that's a common problem because painted bike lanes don't physically stop cars from going there, and it causes a lot of problems. It's a kind of route that if you're a parent, you're going to feel really hesitant to ride with your children or to allow your older kids to ride on that kind of facility. And it's always good to think about kids when you're trying to decide if you've got good infrastructure. On busy streets, the best kind of route infrastructure, and in fact, what we found in our study to be the safest infrastructure of all kinds, even better than off-street bike paths, was a separated bike lane, also called a cycle track, And in the United States, they often call them protected bike lanes. So this is the safest kind of route infrastructure, and it motivates cycling. And what I've really noticed is people are starting to comment that they're starting to see where this kind of infrastructure exists in Vancouver. They're starting to see parents with their kids and also kids riding on their own, which is really an amazing change. And this kind of infrastructure is undergoing a huge boom in North America. This is data from, I think, a comparison of 2007 to 2012. And there's been an increase in the number of cities with this kind of infrastructure from 13 to 58. And it's probably out of date already. And the number of cycle tracks has gone from 25 to 210. And of course, the mileage has gone up along with that. And what you see in the middle there is pictures from a campaign done in the unlikeliest of cities, at least in my view, Oil Town, Cowtown, Calgary, supporting their cycle track network. And this is the first cycle track that was built in Calgary. And they were discussing extending that to make it a network. And this is what Mayor Nenji said, because people were saying, we don't want a cycle track network, there aren't enough cyclists. And he said, of course cycling numbers are low. There's no cycle track network. That's actually evidence to do it, not evidence against it. And he's actually absolutely right, because when they have put in cycle track networks, I'll come to that in a minute. I just wanted to say that in Vancouver, what we've done really well is two kinds of infrastructure that I haven't talked about. One is what you see on the top is just a residential street designated as a bike route. We've got hundreds of kilometers of those, and they're very successful. If you are a cyclist, you've been on Ontario or Heather or Adirondack, any of those residential street bike routes, they're packed with people, they're very successful. We also have quite a few off-street bike routes that are along our waterways, the seawall, and so on. They're also packed with people. The biggest problem is congestion. But what we haven't done in Vancouver is cycle tracks on commercial streets. So we really haven't made it easy we have such wonderful neighborhoods in Vancouver, all these little neighborhoods with shopping streets, and they are great to attract local business. Lots of people walk to them, but what we don't have is a way for people to cycle to those places. And in Holland and Denmark and all these high cycling countries, that's what they do. They allow people to make their short shopping trips to those neighborhoods. You may live too far away from work to cycle, but most people live close to a neighborhood shopping street, and wouldn't it be great to make that easy to get to? And I think this is, the bottom picture is along Commercial Drive. It's a new bike parking installation and holds lots of bikes, which is great. So where cycle tracks have been installed, one thing is absolutely clear: cycling has increased. And the average documented increase is almost twofold increases in cycling. Some places have had less increase in cycling, and other places have had fourfold increases in cycling. Also, the risk of injury to bicyclists has gone down. So those two things seem self-evident. It seems obvious if you had separated infrastructure, people would cycle, and it seems obvious when you get the cars out of the interaction with the cyclists, there would be lower injury risk. But the amazing thing about cycle tracks is they've done all these other things. Crashes between cars and pedestrians have gone down. Motor vehicle crashes with each other have gone down. So all modes of transport have had lower injury risk. Other data from numerous cities have shown that retail sales on the streets with cycle tracks have gone up. Some of them have shown that overall congestion, traffic congestion, has gone down. And in New York City, they showed that travel times went down. Now in Vancouver, where we put in cycle tracks, I don't think there's evidence of travel times going down, but there has been very little evidence of travel times going up. And I'm going to look at Jerry, and he's nodding. So that's what I wanted to tell you about, and I'm happy to hear any questions or comments.